Starting.
All right, good evening. My name is Paul Martin. I'll give it a minute here, make sure everyone gets connected with their audio, and we're looking to go ahead and begin our workshop this evening. All right, I see a few people online. This is a relatively small group that's participating in the workshop this evening via the Zoom webinar link. In person in Azalea Hall, there's also the in-person group and presentation that's going to be done in parallel. Initially, we were expecting that they would be done together, but there's some audio video issues at Azalea Hall. So the group that's in person is going to go through the same slide deck as what we are going to go through here. So I want to make sure that everyone can hear me okay. I don't know if, let's see, Pat, can I unmute you and then have you just confirm you're
able to hear you great.
Wonderful, thank you. It's handy to confirm that. Okay. So anyways, again, my name is Paul Martin. I work at Mark Thomas. Thank you for coming this evening to our community meeting number 2, specific to the McKinleyville Multimodal Connections Project. With me this evening is Jay Riddle. So Jay and I both had the screen backgrounds. You should be able to see working for Mark Thomas. So Jay and I have been working on this project together in earnest. And then, as I mentioned, in person at Azalea Hall is the Redwood Community Action Agency, and the team there is doing the presentation for the audience that's there in person. Good thing is we have the same content on both sides, so they're able to manage in person, and then we'll go through the digital version. So we do have a slide for announcements if anyone needed language translation. We actually don't have that available with this group of presenters, but I'll keep going. Hopefully that works out for everyone. I apologize if anyone needed language translation. Really, our Spanish speaking audience is in Azalea Hall, and I would really butcher it if I tried. Okay, so then talking through our agenda shown on the screen, you see we want to go through a little bit of introductions, and then we do have a presentation. There's a good amount of slides, but I'll try and keep moving it along, Jay and I both. And then we want to save some time for some breakout discussions. We've got a group of about 8 people, it looks like, here participating online. So we won't need to have separate groups, but we can get your input on some of the ideas and have you participate in some sort of scoring on some of our prompts. And then we will do a bit of a recap to finish up the evening. And of course, we always want to highlight some sort of conversation guidelines. So on the screen, we do ask that everyone be respectful and speak one at a time. Right now, your audio may be muted, but we can unmute when there's prompts and questions. Let's see, I want to double check. Is there a raise hand feature? Jay, do you know if that's available on this?
I can see a raise hand feature on my own side. I am not sure if our participants today are able to view the raise hand feature.
Yeah, it's under reactions.
Thanks. Okay, I apologize. When I'm doing the screen share, the interface looks a little bit different. So that's why I'm asking some of those questions. So as long as that option is available, we would ask people go ahead and use that to ask a question. In general, we'll walk through the slides, but I'm happy to try and clarify if there's some questions as we go through, because there's a lot of content. But we do want to move it along, and of course share the airtime, so not get dwell too deeply on one item, so that we have time for all the key ideas and points that we're going to talk through. And then be patient with the technology. So we're already seeing a little bit of an issue with the technology tonight, but we will continue and get through that. All right, so then thank you again for participating. As a reminder, the Multimodal Connections Project has some key goals of how we can enhance safety and connectivity for all modes, integrate with both transportation and housing opportunities within the McKinleyville area. And then our job really on the consulting side is to facilitate input and create a plan with these conceptual designs and ideas that then can be advanced by the county Public Works Department, the County of Humboldt. And our study area is shown on the screen here. So this is the original graphic. It hasn't changed. It really conveys the message. So the green boundary shows our general study area on the east, roughly to Azalea, and encompassing the area all the way up central to just north of Railroad. And then the westerly edge is roughly the Hammond Trail, and then all the way back down. And it does go south of the Mad River, with this idea of how we can look at improvements within the McKinleyville area, as well as the north-south crossings of the Mad River. And as far as a project schedule overview, we did begin the project about a year ago in the spring last year. And we've done a variety of public engagement activities, our community meeting #1, and walking tours with the community. There was opportunities for the community to provide input about photo and video submissions in the fall. And our team has been developing concepts based on that needs analysis and the input we've received. And then at the beginning of the month, on April 1st and 2nd, we did a temporary demonstration event, sometimes called pop-up, that we're going to talk through in a minute here. But the demonstration illustrated an engineering concept with temporary materials. And then tonight we're hosting our community meeting #2, and we do plan to subsequently finalize the conceptual designs based on the input we receive and provide that final report to the county. So I'm going to hand it over to Jay to speak a little bit about the demonstration on Hiller Road. I think, Jay, we have about 4 or 5 slides with photos, and then there's the conclusions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Paul mentioned earlier, on April 1st and April 2nd, there was this pop-up demonstration event in which the project team demonstrated a 2-way bikeway on Hiller Road in front of 200 Central Avenue. So next slide, thanks. So you can see here what we have done is we've chalked out bicycle lanes in both directions and placed some temporary materials to illustrate what the improvement would look like if it were fully constructed. So the paper that you see underneath the red cones is meant to illustrate a raised median that would help protect bicyclists from the moving vehicles in the travel lane. This demonstration event also showed what a parking protected 2-way bikeway would look like. So that is why we have the parked cars on the left. That way you have your bicyclists free to travel in both directions with 2 measures of separated physical buffer between them and the moving vehicles. We had great community feedback at this event. Approximately 50-some participants showed up and engaged with the pop-up demonstration event, whether that was riding their bicycles through it, riding their skateboards. We had some people walking their dogs utilize the space. It was just very well utilized by the community. And then we also had a series of engagement boards on display that asked a series of questions such as where do you live within the Humboldt County area, and what are your preferred bikeway types? So we can see on the right with the image of 3 people and the young child, this was our what is your preferred bikeway type, and we asked individuals to use the stickers to vote on their preferred type. So we showed the bicycle lane, a buffered bicycle lane, the 1-way or 2-way separated bikeway with median barrier, which is shown on the board in the lower left-hand corner, is what was demonstrated on that day, on those days, April 1st and April 2nd. And then on the bottom right, we had the multi-use widened sidewalk trail, which was by far the most popular, or I'm sorry, the second most popular with 19 stickers. The bottom left, the 1-way or 2-way separated bikeway with median barrier, that was the most popular. We did hear much from the community that the image on the bottom right was would have been preferable, except for understanding the limitations with needing to require property in order to complete that. And so we had a fair amount of people move their vote over to the bottom left for that reason. But what we understand is these are our two most popular preferred types of bikeways. And some key feedback that we received from the community. People did enjoy the separated facilities. They felt that it was safer for people with families, strollers, and individuals felt like they could trust their children using the facilities and be safe from vehicular traffic. Participants expressed an interest on these types of facilities or just general transportation improvements, specifically on Hiller Road, McKinleyville Avenue, Washington Avenue, and School Road. And participants were interested in seeing other types of traffic calming measures throughout the community, especially where students are frequently traveling. And then
there we go. All right, thank you, Jay. So then I would note that the demonstration that was done was a fun way for us to really hear input from the community above and beyond this idea. And while we demonstrated this two-way separated bikeway on Hiller, that idea could be employed somewhere else on different roadways. And it's just a nice way to get a discussion about infrastructure. So there were some images shown on the graphic, the voting option with the stickers. Some of those key improvement types we want to walk through. And again, you could see these photos a bit larger. So in the upper left, we have a typical bicycle lane. It might have some on-street paint, the green highlight to highlight conflict zones or merge areas, but that's the more typical, like on Central Avenue. There is a striped bike lane next to moving traffic. The image on the upper right shows a bus and then a bikeway adjacent to the curb. And in between the bike lane and the bus is a hatch. So some sort of horizontal space separating the moving traffic from the bicycle lane. The image on the bottom left shows what if that hatched painted buffer is a raised barrier or some sort of physical obstruction that really helps define that separation between moving traffic and cyclists. And then the image on the bottom right again is that off-street trail. In this case, it's next to a railroad. So these photos are meant to really just show the variety of infrastructure, in this case, specific to bikeways. Additionally, we want to introduce a couple things that might come up, that will come up this evening. So the image on the upper left is a concept called the advisory lanes. So where you might typically have a two-lane roadway without sidewalks or shoulders, you essentially stripe in a shoulder, and then motorists are able to travel in both directions on the roadway, and they would just yield to another oncoming motorist whenever some passing needs to occur, and they can still drive in that shoulder edge across the dash white line, but only when needed. So this is a well-suited concept for a low volume street where you might have people walking, bicycling, or riding a horse within an area or a specific roadway. The image on the upper right shows a roadway that is, in this photo, the after condition, where typically you might have 4 travel lanes and no bike lane or no shoulder. That is reconfigured for 1 travel lane in each direction with a center 2-way left turn lane. And usually within that space, you're able to provide then the on-street bikeway or some sort of shoulder space. So that's called a lane reduction, going from 4 travel lanes to essentially 3 travel lanes. In the bottom left, we see the concept of shoulder widening. Sometimes something as simple as a shoulder can achieve a lot. So this image does show rumble strips that can come or go, but the idea is to be able to define a little more space that might be used by pedestrians, people walking, or cycling. And then, of course, we don't want to lose sight that sidewalk gap closures and really addressing connectivity for people walking is always important, and there's definitely some opportunities in McKinleyville. So those are more the high-level toolkit ideas. Now I want to walk through some of the corridor improvement options. Based on the feedback from the community, we highlighted various areas within the project study area where improvements are recommended or desired from the community, I should say. So we've got these numbers 1 through 8. I'm going to walk through different concepts and recommendations for all of these. Also, we wanted to highlight that there's a couple areas that have additional discussion that is needed. So the image here shows in pink various locations that might be technically outside of our study area, or that the images, the numbers 2, 3, and 4, and 5 at the top have some sort of relationship to the town center project, a separate land development project under consideration. And then there's this image number 6 in the center along Central Avenue that we want to make sure to touch base on and discuss some interim improvements to try and address Central Avenue. So these two images are our high level, kind of our agenda of different corridors we're going to talk through. So now I want to walk through some of the recommendations. We've created this graphic, similar page for each of the corridors. And we start with Hiller Road. So a Hiller Road west of Highway 101 to be able to connect over to Fisher Avenue, or the roadway that connects to Hiller Park. Today, the photo shown on the right illustrates people are traveling this route, and there's a shoulder on the roadway, but there's no dedicated sidewalk in this case for the mom with the stroller. Our recommendation is go ahead and maintain this roadway as 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction, some opportunity for shoulder parking. And then the concept in the bottom left, this rendering or cross section shows a widened sidewalk or path that might be a dual function space for people both walking, rolling, or cycling along the corridor. So I'm going to go through each of these concepts on additional roadways as well. And then we're going to save some time where we want your input about how well you like this idea or don't. And then the cross sections and those graphics will show up again later. Jay, are there any hands raised or any questions at this point?
We just received the question of, will the slideshow be available to us after this meeting?
Got it. Thank you. I can't see the chat, or I don't have it handy here. So feel free to prompt me whenever stuff comes up. And yes, we are recording the video presentation. And additionally, the PowerPoint slides will be posted. We do have a website that the county maintains for this specific project. It actually has the recording for the first community workshop, and we'll put the slides in tonight's recording on that website as well. Okay. All right. Now I wanted to talk about McKinleyville Avenue. So south of Hiller Road, the roadway today on McKinleyville Avenue has sidewalks in some portions, but not everywhere. And then it doesn't have a defined bikeway within the corridor. So along McKinleyville Avenue, there's 2 options in this case that we wanted to present. So at some point, we'll ask you to weigh in on which of these 2 options you prefer. Option number 1, shown on the top right, is a concept that would stripe a dedicated bike lane, still maintaining 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction, and would address sidewalk gaps as well. But here you would at least get a dedicated bike lane. And in that case, you may need to remove some on-street parking. So we've tried to quantify that based on the distances, and it looks like roughly up to 17 parking spaces would be removed for that concept or restricted. Now, the parking, we don't have information about how often that parking is used, but that personal experience and from when we've been there, we haven't necessarily seen it all 17 spaces always used or highly frequently. So it is a bit of a discussion with the community and the people along that corridor about their preferences, but at the very least tonight, we can get your input. And then option number 2 shows a concept where the parking would be maintained, but in this case, you would have a concept where bicyclists and motorists would share the travel lane like they do today, but maybe it could be reinforced through markings on the roadway. So the image in the bottom left shows the 2 chevrons, these kind of arrow shapes. There is a concept where you could put those chevrons or the arrows on the roadway with paint and then a bicycle insignia that helps reinforce that that roadway is a shared space for both bicyclists and motorists. So we use that term. It's a shared lane marking is the more formal term. Within the industry, a lot of people will use the term sharrows, kind of a mashup of arrow and shared arrow. So those are two options along McKinleyville Avenue. Then on Washington Avenue, which is nearby, between Washington, McKinleyville and School Road, there's some similar issues, some gaps within the sidewalk. And then again, within the bikeway concept, these two options, maybe removing on-street parking, or option two is to provide the shared lane markings. So a lot of the question for you to think about is, would you feel comfortable with shared lane markings, or would you prefer the on-street bike lanes? And in this case, it's a bit of a trade-off, the on-street parking or dedicated bike lanes, or your comfort level with the shared lane markings and having to mix with car traffic in the same space as a bicyclist in that case. I'll keep going. School Road. Along School Road between Anderson and Central, so this is generally east of Highway 101, our recommendations are to go ahead and close some of the gaps along the sidewalk. There are some areas where there's some sidewalks missing along there. And then at the roundabout, the clarity for bicyclists could use some improvements. So we are recommending that some components of the design of the roundabout be modified to help strengthen the path for people riding a bicycle. A lot of times with roundabouts, there's an option for an off-street trail, essentially, for a bicyclist to get essentially onto a widened sidewalk through the roundabout if they're not comfortable mixing with car traffic in the diameter, in the circle of the roundabout. Any questions or anything I need to answer right now?
No questions in the chat.
All right, I'll keep going. All right, so now we get into another roadway with a variety of options. So here we have Central Avenue between Hiller and Bella Vista. So this is kind of the core area of Central Avenue, where there's a lot of commercial businesses fronting and multiple driveways. In this area, we have three recommendations to consider, or options. The first one has minimal change to the travel lanes, but some recommendation to consider narrowing the travel lanes from 12 feet to 11 feet, which provides some space to be able to provide a dedicated buffer, striped buffer between moving traffic and the bike lane. So we call that the buffered bike lane. This would have no modification to the bridle trail on the east side of Central Avenue or the sidewalks on either side of Central Avenue. The next option, option two, does have this scenario of reducing travel lanes from 2 travel lanes in each direction to 1 travel lane. And the concept here simply restripes the space for a dedicated buffer space and then a widened bikeway. So a lot of bicyclists may prefer this because they get a greater horizontal distance between moving traffic and the bicycle way. However, the traffic operations along the corridor might be affected. This is an option that we wanted to put in the public arena because it's under consideration with the town center about potentially reducing the number of travel lanes. Really, as you go a little further north of Railroad, the street, the Central Avenue does narrow back down to 2 travel lanes. So the idea is really continuing the 2 travel lanes within the core area of Central Avenue all the way down towards Bella Vista. And then there's a third option on Central Avenue. This third option maintains the travel lanes as shown, but on the west side has an idea of widening what is shown as the sidewalk today and providing a dedicated trail that's off street. So for someone that wants to walk or bicycle or roll in a wheelchair or some other mobility device, that they could use a dedicated trail along the roadway. and up off of the asphalt or the actual area where car traffic is traveling. This still maintains the on-street bike lanes and the travel lanes along Central Avenue. So we'll come back to getting your input on these three options in a little bit, but I'll keep going for now. We also wanted to mention that there's some of these ideas may take some time to implement. So there are some solutions that can be recommended with the county in the interim and Caltrans. So along Central Avenue, the image shown on the right is around Bella Vista, just south of Bella Vista, really, where the roadway is pretty much two travel lanes, one in each direction. And in the photograph on the right, you see the truck coming up the roadway. This is right where the road starts to widen. So in that area or along this whole area south of school, some of these might have greater applicability. So the first idea is taking a look at how you could provide some sort of stripe buffer between the travel lanes and the bike lanes along the corridor. Also, there's areas along Central where there's landscaping, which is nice to provide some greenery. However, sometimes that landscaping starts to overflow into the shoulder or the bike lane. So the recommendation is to help make sure that it is narrowed or trimmed and maintained so that we preserve an effective width area. Item number 3 recommends paving a dedicated path on the shoulder between School Road and Bartow. Bartow is north of Bella Vista. In that area, you see a well-defined footpath. So trying to provide something more formalized that is better when it's wet conditions, some sort of concrete surface that is all weather and can serve people walking or rolling in some sort of mobility device would be desired. Item 4 does talk about this image on the right where the roadway is starting to widen around Bella Vista, but shortly thereafter, the additional lane is removed or dropped. It merges back as you proceed north towards School Road. So our recommendation is to go ahead and consider removing that additional lane around the Bella Vista Road area, providing a little more space between people along the shoulder and the moving traffic. And then number 5 talks about providing a dedicated shoulder at least 4 to 5 feet wide, all the way south of where this photograph is shown, all the way down to Henry Lane, which is effectively, or south of Henry Lane. So pretty much where this photo is taken, roughly around Henry or Bella Vista, south to North Bank Road, and provide a dedicated space. We've definitely seen people walking and bicycling within that space, and sometimes that width is a bit narrow. And then item number 6 is to provide a RRFB. I apologize, we have that acronym there, but that's a traffic engineering term for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is similar to what you see on Central Avenue between the traffic signals, where people can hit the button, and then there's rectangular flashing lights that alert motorists that there would be a pedestrian in the crosswalk. So our recommendation is to consider putting one in at Reserve Road, which lines up with the park and ride lot, which is on North Bank and serves that the terminus of that access, the trail along Highway 101 that goes over Mad River. Is there any questions right now?
We don't have any additional questions in the chat so far.
Okay, thanks, Jay. I'll keep going. We want to save some time to hear from you all directly. All right, then some of these other options are a little more straightforward. So these should be pretty intuitive. Here we have a recommendation on North Bank Road to go ahead and widen the shoulder. North Bank is actually managed by Caltrans, so it's not quite the county. And in this case, you see the photograph, there's effectively no shoulder. That white stripe goes right up to the edge of the roadway, but there's no space really for anyone to walk or bicycle along the roadway. And in the text there in the upper left, it does talk about potentially a second phase to continue east of Azalea. That's something that we would urge Caltrans to consider and program in their system. And then Azalea Avenue provides a north-south travel between North Bank and the homes north of there. Azalea typically has a part that's uphill or along going up or down. So roughly between North Bank and Hewitt, we recommend also that the shoulder be widened for people that might be walking or bicycling within that area and provide a more defined space. And then where Azalea is flat north of Hewitt and pretty straight, our recommendation is to go ahead and consider that shared lane markings concept where bicyclists are sharing the space with travel lanes. That really is what the law allows today, but it can be formalized through additional pavement markings and signs that help reinforce the right of way. Now I'm going south of the river, Mad River Road, Miller Lane, and Hinden Road. All of these roadways today are 2-lane roadways. And you see in the photograph here a trash truck that is traveling along there, and sometimes larger vehicles related to the agriculture and the dairy activity in the area. So a recommendation is to consider that advisory travel lane, where you would simply remove that yellow stripe from the center of the roadway and provide a dash shoulder on both sides. And with the low car traffic along that roadway, then you can provide more of a comfort level for people to be on the edges if they're walking, bicycling, or riding a horse. And then motorists can travel in the center of the roadway. This would also allow the large vehicles like what's shown in the image to travel in the center of the roadway and not damage the outside edge of the roadway. Option 2 along those same roadways is really to reinforce what we see today. In this case, bicyclists riding along the roadway in the travel lane and reinforcing that through shared lane markings and signs. So there's 2 options there for these roadways that help with that connectivity from the Hammond Trail footbridge to the south. Now we're up at Ocean Drive. I'm almost finished. Along Ocean, we do see a similar circumstance of a 2-lane road with no defined shoulders, but you see some footpaths where people do walk in the area. The proximity to the ocean there is real nice. We see a lot of activity, but probably not much interest in really widening the roadway or building sidewalks that might affect driveways and parking along there. So again, we see a scenario where you could consider advisory lanes. And then I mentioned earlier the town center project, so we don't want to lose sight of that. Separate from the McKinleyville Multimodal Connections project is this ongoing effort to develop a master plan for the development of the town center, is shown in yellow in the image on the right. So our study, we want to recommend different ideas that are consistent with the town center, but recognize that town center will continue to progress on its own pace, and maybe some of the recommendations will be a little different. So what we do have listed here is some improvements along McKinleyville Avenue, as well as Railroad Drive, things like sidewalk gap closures, additional signing and striping. And then along Central Avenue, the town center project is talking today about a cycle track or a separated bikeway in each direction. So a lot like the photograph that we showed earlier, where there's some sort of physical barrier between moving traffic and the bicyclists. And one way means if you're traveling northbound on Central, you would have space to travel north on the right side of the roadway. And then same thing in the southbound direction, but still a single direction bikeway. And similar concepts under consideration on Hiller Road. Today, Hiller is only 2 travel lanes. The idea there is to provide sidewalks and this separated bikeway in both directions on Hiller. So our document is going to be consistent with the current ideas that are being considered for the town center, but we recognize again that the town center may continue to evolve. All right, so I've gone through pretty quickly the content that we had developed for the slides. So I wanted to now mention that we want to flip over to a survey tool that we've developed, where we would ask you to provide your input. And this is your chance to weigh in using your phones. I do see a question from Kelly. Let me go ahead and try and unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Kelly.
Great, thanks, Paul. So just a quick question or a quick comment with the town center mobility improvements. There's a crossing of Central at Gwynn, which leads to Pearson Park, and it doesn't have sidewalk. So it's there at the Safeway Shopping Center. When you exit through the main entry exit that has the big signs and stuff, as you cross Central Avenue headed to the east, you hit Gwynn Road, and there's no sidewalk there that would take you on to the what is it, Thunderbird Mobile Home Park, and on up to where the seniors live. And then you would cross the street to get to a sidewalk that would take you to Pearson Park. But there's no sidewalk on the south side of Gwynn Road.
Got it. You're right. We have talked about that. And one of the engagement activities that we did was a walk audit around Pearson Park. So we definitely saw that dynamic of the gap in the sidewalks along that area. So thanks for the reminder. That's another item. We've tried to cover as much ground as possible in the different corridors that we talked about tonight, but that's definitely one that is on our radar, and we'll make sure that we don't lose sight of that need. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now before we go to the surveys? Okay. So Jay, let's see, you'll do your screen share.
Yes, getting that loaded right now. Okay, I think all should be able to see my screen at this time. Paul, can you see it all right?
Yes.
Okay, so if our participants on the call would like to use either their mobile phone or their laptop computers, the choice is up to you, whichever you feel more comfortable with. If you have your mobile phone, you're more than welcome to use the QR code scanner through the photo app or the camera app and open up our Mentimeter page. Or you can go ahead and enter in your phone or your web browser www.menti.com. It's spelled there on the screen, and use the code listed below, which is 65904681. And it looks like somebody used the response icon in the lower left or the lower right corner. So we know that we have at least one participant on. And I'll give it a minute for others to go ahead and join. And please raise your hand or unmute yourself if you're having any issues with signing on to the Mentimeter. Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward with it. So what we have are a series of slides using Mentimeter that essentially cover all of the cross sections and roadway improvements that we were just seeing on the previous presentation. So those of us who are on the Menti, you can use the sliding scale. We have a series of 5 rankings, one being the lowest, which is strongly dislike. And then it varies up to a 5, a score of 5, which is strongly prefer. So a 2 would be neutral, and then a 1 or a 4 would, wait, 1, no, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 1 is strongly dislike, and then a 2 and a 4 are somewhat dislike and somewhat prefer. And then as our participants are voting, we're actually able to see the live participation rate of how everybody's preferences kind of even out, or it shows us the average of everybody's statements. So right now it looks like what we can see in the bottom right-hand corner, we have the little person icon with the bubble on top that says the number 2. I can kind of highlight it with my mouse here, which means that we're seeing the voting of 2 participants so far. And whereas the average is a 4.5, so just slightly between somewhat prefer, and strongly prefer. And it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, let's see. I'm going to go back and show the barcode, and then that will actually, Kelly, we're going to go back and show the barcode. It's actually going to shift everybody's Menti screens back, but it saves the results. So just give us 1 second, everyone. And I'm going to shift it forward again. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so we have 4 votes so far. We're still at an average of 4.5. We have, I think it was 6 participants on the line. So we'll aim for 5 in case there's somebody who doesn't want to participate on the Mentimeter, or we'll just move forward with 4 if we don't receive a 5th vote. Oh, there we go. Okay, so looks like the average of 5 participants is a 4.6. So we had slightly more people vote as a strongly prefer. And this is for the widened sidewalk trail on the north side of Hiller Road. We'll go ahead and go to the next cross section or recommendation. So we don't have a cross section for this, but this is Hiller Road between Highway 101 and Central Avenue. So essentially the continuation from, Paul, can you chat? Thank you. This is essentially a continuation from that widened sidewalk trail that would have ended at the Highway 101, and it continues to Central Avenue. And throughout this corridor, we do recognize that this is contingent on the town center design and what happens as that moves forward. But for the purpose of this project, the McKinleyville Multimodal Connections Project, we would be recommending a sidewalk gap closure, a one-way cycle track in both directions of the roadway, and then narrowing or simplifying the intersection at Hiller Road and McKinleyville Avenue.
And feel free to use the raise hand feature if anyone has any questions.
So out of 5 participants, we have an average score of 4.8. So this one was leaning a little more towards strongly prefer out of all the votes. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next. So here we're looking at McKinleyville Avenue between Railroad Drive and Hiller Road. This segment of McKinleyville Avenue, as it is located next to a school, has received some improvements more recently. So we do see some bike lanes and some pedestrian crossings near the school. So for the recommendation here, it would be simply to enhance the signage, enhance the roadway striping, as well as the street crossings. Okay, and we have an average of 4.4. So we'll go ahead, and we have 5 participants who have provided their feedback. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next. Okay, so this one is a little bit different as we have two sliders and we have 2 cross sections as well. So this is McKinleyville Avenue between Hiller Road and Chelsea Way. And this is the one in which you have the option to select if you would prefer class 2 bike lanes, which would provide bicyclists with their own dedicated path of travel, although it would entail removing or restricting some on-street parking spaces. And then option 2, which is the class 3 shared arrow route or SHARO route, which is essentially how the roadway functions today, although it would be formalized through pavement markings and street signage, such as bicyclists may use full lane. Okay, great. So it looks like we have had 6 participants in the vote on their preferred option. For both, we do have people on both ends of strongly dislike and strongly prefer. Overall, it looks like class 2 bicycle lanes are slightly more preferred than the class 3 SHARO route. And as we are ranking them here in this meeting, I do want to point out that this is not the end all be all for your input. This does not mean that class 2 bike lanes wins overall. There is community feedback and engagement occurring at Azalea Hall in person, and there will be further meetings with the community. But we do like to kind of compare these 2 options side by side as we're looking at what we can do with the roadway. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. And then for Washington Avenue between McKinleyville Avenue and School Road, the first and second sliders are essentially the same situation as the last. The class 2 bike lanes, dedicated bicycle lane for travel, possible removal or restriction of some on-street parking versus the class 3 shared arrow route, which is how it operates today, but the formalization through pavement markings and signage. So that's option 1 and option 2. So those are the 2 that we're looking at for comparison. And then the sidewalk gap closure would be something separate. So, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that dog barking. But sidewalk gap closure is something separate. So it would be able to be a part of either option 1 or option 2. Okay, so we have 5 participants. It looks like almost just about everyone who voted strongly prefers the sidewalk gap closure. And then similar to the previous cross section, the class 2 bike lanes are preferred within this group of community engagement. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this is School Road, Anderson Avenue to Central Avenue, in which we're recommending sidewalk gap closure, and then the roundabout modification. These are not an either or. They're not option 1, option 2. They are just 2 recommendations that we've identified for the project based on community feedback. And we're looking to hear some additional feedback on moving forward with it.
And people are voting, but certainly if anyone has any questions or they wanted to discuss any of the input, the raise hand button would be handy under the reactions. You could do that, and then we can see if someone wants to chime in. So it looks like Lynn's iPad.
Yeah, question, what do you mean by the roundabout modification?
Got it. So I'll take that. This earlier I mentioned briefly that the roundabout design today doesn't do the greatest for accommodating people bicycling.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of modern roundabouts are designed so that if someone's riding a bicycle, as they approach the circle of the roundabout, they have the option to travel within the circle of the roundabout. Not everyone's comfortable with that, so a lot of times there's like a ramp option where you could get up on essentially a widened sidewalk and a widened space so that it still serves people walking as well as people riding their bicycle through the roundabout, and they would cross at the crosswalks like pedestrians do. So at this one, we recommended that, but still remain the roundabout, still serve car traffic like it does today.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll go ahead and move to the next quiz. Okay, and then here we have the Central Avenue Railroad Drive to Bella Vista Drive, and this is the one in which we have three separate options. The first one being the buffered bicycle lanes. So this would not create any large changes to the existing flow of motor vehicles. A little bit of lane narrowing might be necessary in order to provide a striped buffer between the bicycle travel lane and the outer right vehicle travel lane. The second option is the motor vehicle lane reduction, in which the roadway would essentially go from 4 travel lanes and a center turn lane to 2 travel lanes with a center turn lane. And this would be consistent with the 2 travel lanes that are located, I think it's north of
Bates.
is it Bates? I think it's south of Bartow Road, and I'm sorry,
On the north, it was Babbler.
Babbler, and north of Babbler Road. Thank you. And this would provide enhanced separation between the motor vehicles and the bicyclists. And whereas option 3, there would be no changes to the existing motor vehicle traffic or the bicycle lanes, but the sidewalk on the western side of Central Avenue would be widened to provide a sort of a class 1 trail or a multi-use trail in which pedestrians and bicyclists would be able to use the facility to travel both north and south on Central Avenue. We've had 4 participants vote on this one so far. We'll give it another minute as this is it's a lot to think about, these changes on Central Avenue. So please raise your hand if you have any questions or you need any clarifications on the 3 types of options that are presented on the screen.
I do. I'm sorry. I have a quick question. I'm on my phone, so it's kind of hard for me to raise my hand. So, but I just wanted to clarify on option 1. Does that require additional right-of-way? Is that correct?
So option.
No. Okay.
I'll
So
answer
none of them require additional right-of-way.
Right now, correct. Right now,
Okay,
all 3 of
perfect.
these
Thank you.
concepts avoid taking right-of-way or requiring right-of-way acquisition.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet. That's a good point. I didn't cover that earlier. The intent is to try and maintain within their current space without requiring some sort of sliver take on properties.
So we've had 5 participants provide their input, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next. Oh, there we go, 6. Looks like overall buffered bike lanes was the most preferred at a 4.2. Second choice of this group of participants was 3.8. And then we have motor vehicle lane reduction was the least preferred at an average of 2.3. Let's see. So these were talked about during the previous presentation when we were discussing interim improvements that can be done along Central Avenue, primarily south of Bella Vista Drive. Is it Bella Vista Drive, Paul, or Bartow Road?
Really, like south of school is kind of the core area where some of this would apply.
South of school, thank you. So buffer between northbound travel lanes and shoulder bike lanes where possible. What we currently have throughout that segment of the roadway is a shoulder in which people typically walk or bicyclists will ride in the shoulder. It's slightly separated from vehicles, but mostly through a striped white line, if at all. So the buffer would essentially be a wider patch of asphalt, which is hatched to designate that the motor vehicles are not to be traveling within that shoulder area. Then landscaping maintenance to avoid plant overgrowth that would essentially ensure that the shoulder area or bike lane, whichever exists during that portion, remains clear of any vegetation. And then paved path on shoulder between School Road and Bartow Road. There is an existing footpath that is shown when we look at the project area just through repeated footsteps. So it's sort of an informal trail that's been created. So the recommendation would essentially be to formalize this area and to lay down concrete for a multi-use trail. And then we have consider roadway restriping to remove the second northbound travel lane at Central Avenue, Bella Vista Road. As you're traveling northbound on Central and you're approaching the brewery at Bella Vista Road, there is a right turn lane that is stated vehicles must turn right or merge left. But then after that intersection, the lane continues. So this would essentially be a restriping or a modification to the intersection so that you don't have vehicles going straight from that right turn lane. And then shoulder widening south of Henry Lane to provide 4 to 5 feet effective width. And this would essentially provide more room for bicyclists or pedestrians within that area. And at Reserve Road, North Bank Road, where we see the Mad River Bike Bridge lets off onto North Bank Road, the recommendation would be to provide a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, which are those yellow diamonds with the image of the pedestrian crossing and the flashing lights to alert motorists that they're coming up on a crosswalk, and a painted crosswalk as well to help facilitate the crossing of pedestrians and bicyclists across North Bank Road. So that was a lot. Please raise your hand if you have any questions on any of those specific items. Okay, Kelly, we see your hand is raised. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself.
This isn't Kelly. I'm sitting next to Kelly.
Hi.
I'm Mitch. I missed that thing about the RRFP. Is that actuated by the bicyclist, or is that just motion sensor? It kind of senses the bicyclist riding up the shoulder, or is there an option is there an option to do one or the other?
Typically, I'll answer that. So typically someone would hit a button for it to trigger. So on Central, you see that, say north of school, for example, there's an RRFB on some of those mid-block crosswalks that are not a full traffic signal with the red, yellow, green. So someone can hit that button to be able to, with this idea, they could hit that button to be able to cross North Bank Road. There are some places I've seen where jurisdictions have done a more passive approach where if you travel between 2 bollards or stanchions, they trigger the infrared is disrupted essentially. So then it knows that someone traveled through there and they're planning to cross. But you have to position those so it's a sure thing essentially that it's reliable. So most of the time we default from a traffic engineering perspective to have a button so that people can press it when they're ready, or to make sure that it's pushed appropriately or triggered the signal when needed.
Paul, is it designed so the bicyclists can hit the button while they're riding, or do you have to actually physically stop? Or
in this case, it would be more like you pause to hit the button and then be able to cross when it triggers. But the benefit with the RRFB is it is immediate typically. So it's not like a traffic signal where you have to hit the button and wait 20 or 30 seconds. In this case, typically an RRFB is immediate.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, that was great. Thanks, Mitch.
Okay, we've had 6 people vote on the options of which they prefer. Buffered bicycle lanes and shoulder widening, as well as the crossing enhancements, are the 3 top favored out of these potential interim treatments. We have had one participant join the call, so I've dropped the Menti website address, as well as the code to access the survey that we are presenting on the screen into the chat box. And we'll go ahead and move to the next. So here we have Azalea Avenue, Cochrane Road to Hewitt Road. This is the northern portion of Azalea Avenue that's within our project area. This portion of Azalea is mostly flat and does not have too many curves. So what we're recommending is the class 3 shared arrow route. And this is due to limited right of way. So we would be essentially creating changes within the amount of pavement that already exists. And this is how the roadway currently operates, in which bicyclists may use a full lane, although this would be the formalization of that through signage and pavement markings. We've had, I see Kelly with your hand raised. Go ahead and ask your question. Or I'm sorry, Mitch or Kelly.
It is Kelly this time again. Just a quick question. I wondered, is the volume of traffic on Azalea appropriate for a potential advisory lane configuration, or is there too much traffic?
It may be. We'd have to check with the county to see what the traffic volumes are, if they have that detail along the roadway. We don't have that at our fingertips, but that could be an option as well.
It seems like it would be a great one if it was possible. Mitch, you had a question?
Yeah, I got a question. You know, I ride that. I drive and I ride that pretty frequently, Azalea. And what I've noticed is the speed bumps there are 50 miles an hour, I believe. But people just a lot of people go fast between the speed bumps. I'm just wondering, why not just post a speed limit out there? I don't see a speed limit sign posted on Azalea, so that's just maybe that's a question for the county.
That's helpful though. Sometimes it's handy to just have the community point that out. We could bring that up with the county as well to confirm that the speed limit signs are put out on Azalea. Maybe it's just missing errantly.
So yeah, what's going on is a lot of Azalea is straight and there aren't any vertical curves. But yeah, I had a few close calls with the vertical curves when cars try to pass me. So it's happened more than once.
Yeah.
So it's just a concern. I don't know what can be done about those vertical curves, issues, other than maybe slowing the speed limit and having signs saying, you know, pass bicycles only when safe or something like that.
And you say the vertical curves. The next slide talks about Azalea.
Okay, great.
To the south, where the hill is that what you mean, or you mean in this?
No, I mean,
You mean from Hewitt south down Azalea to
No.
North Bank?
no.
That's where the vertical curves are.
There are
north of Hewitt.
there are dips in the road between what's that, Sutter and Hewitt.
Yeah, sure. Mhm.
And there you cannot see. I mean, it is truly a vertical curve impeding your blocking your visual
Like this.
sight distance.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I guess we talked about it being straight, but what you're pointing out, there are vertical curves or dips essentially where there's still some speeds there. So we could that's a good
It's
point.
sight issue. You can't pass.
Yeah.
You can't pass safe when
That's true.
when there's a hill.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks for that
Okay.
feedback. I'm going to lower your hand. Okay. So for the other portion of Azalea Avenue, which is further south, this is Hewitt Road to North Bank Road. And for this one, we are proposing a shoulder widening. So this would be requiring the additional pavement, or it would be creating additional pavement on both sides of the roadway. And this would allow for space for pedestrians and bicyclists to walk or bike in the shoulder. It's not a formal bike lane or a sidewalk, but it is just widening that roadway a bit for room for pedestrians and bicyclists to walk along Azalea, separated from the motor vehicle lanes.
Whoops. Sorry, I muted you. I hit the wrong button. I didn't mean to do that. So then this is helpful. Keep going, Jay.
Okay. And then we have North Bank Road from Highway 101 to essentially to State Route 299. For the purposes of this project, the McKinleyville Multimodal Connections Project, we would look at doing the roadway widening between Highway 101 and approximately Azalea Avenue, which is where the project area boundary limits. So our recommendations would include coordinating with Caltrans in the future to look into the possibility of widening the shoulders on North Bank Road between Azalea Avenue and State Route 299. So again, this would be new or fresh asphalt or pavement on both sides of the roadway. And in this case, those shoulders would be 8 feet wide. They would not be formalized bicycle lanes, but it would provide that space for bicyclists to travel on North Bank, separate from the vehicle travel lane. And if we have any questions or clarifications on this proposed, please go ahead and raise your hand or unmute yourself, or we will move on to the next corridor. Okay. Go ahead, Kelly and Mitch.
Hi,
We
this
now
is-
have Sandy.
okay, this is Sandra Roses. Sorry, we're all using, there's 3 of us using the same computer. So you know how dedicated we are. We're down in Cambria on vacation and we're calling in to this
Bike
meeting.
event.
We're at a bike event, so I just wanted to note that.
No, that's
So-
fine. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, so regarding what you guys are proposing on the shoulders there on North Bank Road between 101 and Azalea. So when you said it's not identified as a what is it, a bike lane, but you know, if you guys are proposing an 8-foot shoulder, I mean, that's plenty enough to actually designate a class 2 bike lane, at least to, you know, ideally, you'd want that at least a class 2 all along North Bank from 299 to 101 at minimal. But I mean, you could, you know, in theory, do a class 2 lane, at least from those 2 points. So, I mean, it would be, there's, you know, that would be at least a 5-foot shoulder, 5 to 6 foot shoulder with certain, and I don't know if anybody's from Caltrans, but there's definitely on this call, there's definitely some requirements for a class 2. I think it's either 5 or 6 foot shoulders, and certain markings that they provide that is associated with that a class 2. The other idea is, like, you know, I guess there's just, you said there's going to be discussions with Caltrans. I would suggest that there's some interim measures, because I know how long it takes. It takes a long time for projects to get rolling, and you know, in the process. But at least do maybe some share the road, and not share the road, but because there's no shoulders, we should be having the signs of bikes will take the lane.
So is that
Mhm.
Sharrows? The
That's
arrows?
no, that wouldn't be Sharrows. That's another form where that's another signage, but at least on that stretch, because there isn't any shoulders. Some inner measures, I know right now they have share the road, but that's like, yeah, right, well, whatever. But if signage is bikes will take full lane, I mean, and I also suggest that for Azalea, because that is very dangerous, that stretch from, especially the stretch from North Bank up to Hewitt.
Yep.
It is, and I live on Azalea, and I've noticed an increase exponentially from pandemic times, and has continued, a lot of pedestrians trying to make that walk, which pretty courageous to try to walk along there. But yeah, that stretch, I mean, some interim measures, I know the county has looked at it in the past with some mixed results. I guess the neighbors, the folks in that area were really not all that open to, sidewalks or whatnot. But even some signage and maybe continuance of the speed bumps, at least they slow people down, and that's what they need between that stretch, because people are coming down the hill very fast, going up the hill very fast. Numerous times I've had vehicles going into my lane as I'm riding down the hill from Hewitt down to North Bank, and it's that really, and I mean, I don't know who all's on this call who actually ride that. That's a very popular route for cyclists. So, I would hope that maybe we can, look at doing, some interim measures in addition to the full project that's being proposed. But yeah, so and then of course you have Azalea Preserve, which you have pedestrians going across. At one time there used to be a crosswalk, but that didn't get put in after they paved it. So it'd be nice because you do have people crossing right there. But that's
Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for that feedback. Paul, did you want to say a bit to the shoulders on North Bank?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. North Bank is managed by Caltrans as a roadway, so it's not the county, but I'm with you wholeheartedly. Essentially, we just asked for Caltrans to provide enough width for essentially the class 2 bike lane. I think we've talked about it as a shoulder because also, if it's striped as a bike lane, technically you shouldn't really be walking in it, but maybe there's some middle ground where Caltrans can provide the accommodation that allows for people walking along North Bank too. We would expect it doesn't happen a whole lot, but it sounds like you've seen it directly, Sandra. So that's helpful. We don't want all the recommendations to simply be bike specific all the time, and try and think about bicycle and pedestrian needs in the area. Okay, go ahead, Jen.
So here we're looking at Mad River Road, Miller Lane, and Hinden Road, and this is the path of travel between the Hammond Trail Bridge and downtown Arcata. And option 1 would be the reconfigured roadway striping, or as we've referred to them in the past presentation, advisory lanes or edge lanes, in which you have the center vehicle lane, where vehicles travel in both directions in that center lane, and can travel in the edge lanes or the outer lanes as needed, but must yield to whichever user is in front. So these advisory lanes, as a reminder, all types of users can be in them. That includes pedestrians, bicyclists, people with strollers, and even equestrians. The option 2 is the class 3 shared arrow route or share route. And so this is the one where this is essentially how the roadway operates today, except that it would be formalized through signage and through pavement markings. So we've had 6 people participate on the call. Pretty close call between the two. It looks like reconfigured roadway striping came in average of 3.8, with the other at an average of 3.7. We appreciate this feedback, and we will again be considering which to move forward with, along with the participation or the feedback that's occurring at Azalea Hall with people attending in person right now. And then for the next slide, we have Ocean Drive, Hiller Road to School Road, which is technically outside of our project area, but it is something that has come up in discussions throughout this community engagement process. So we didn't want to simply overlook Ocean Drive. So for this one, the recommendation is again advisory lanes or reconfigured roadway striping edge lanes. And then the use is the same as in the previous slide, option 1, in which you have the center vehicle turn lane, and then the 2 outer edge lanes that can be used by bicyclists, pedestrians, anyone with a wheelchair or stroller, and even equestrians. And for this one, we've had 6 people participate on the call. That one was pretty quick, and it looks like for the most part, our participants here on this call prefer this option. And that is the end of the survey portion, where we ask you all to go ahead and use the sliders to provide your feedback. And then we'll go ahead and switch it back over to Paul for the main presentation. But please let us know through raise of hand if anyone has any questions after participating in that activity.
Okay, wonderful. You hear me okay, Jay?
Yes.
And I've done the screen share now, so we're back to the PowerPoint slide deck. We had built in opportunity for a breakout session, but the reality is that we've talked as a group and answered questions as we've gone. You see how we try and are facilitating some sort of input to get the public, everyone that's attending tonight, to provide your thoughts, at least some sense of how you like these ideas. If a lot, if you dislike them, whatever, to at least get that input and make it as interactive as we can in these dynamics with the video and virtual webinar presentation. But it's nice that we're able to get some participation from a few people that are traveling, and all of you are hopefully are able to participate from some comfortable place. So on the current slide, we do have our recap and next steps. This is similar to what you saw earlier, where we had highlighted tonight we're in community meeting number 2. We're going to take the input that we've received tonight, as well as the input that's being received at Azalea Hall in person, and work with RCAA and the county to get input and try and refine some of these concepts and prepare a report that the county can review. So that is our next step, really, is finalizing the concepts and providing something that really empowers the county as we go forward. So let's see, I want to wrap up with our information and contact info and the project website. So on the screen is a reminder that there is a project website that the county does manage. So the link is shown there through this as best we can, provided a shortened link, but there's also a QR code. And at RCAA, Carla Avila Martinez is our point of contact that's helping with the public engagement activities. So Carla is our point that you can email with questions or call directly if you have something that you wanted to follow up on. If you think about something tomorrow or in discussion with friends, you realize there's some other idea or comment that you wanted to provide, Carla can provide that. And on the project website, there is her information as well. I know I haven't bookmarked the website. Sometimes what I just type in is McKinleyville Multimodal into a web search, and it comes up with the county webpage. So it's pretty easy. It hopefully is pretty easy to find for all of you. Does anyone have any questions or anything else that we can answer? Otherwise, that is pretty much the end. I do want to, of course, thank you for your participation, but I like leaving it on this slide so everyone can see the contact info. Does anyone have anything else that they wanted to say or ask?
I'll briefly show you that we have some folks in the room as well doing a live version of this same kind of session. So anyway, some of us are looking at physical maps and talking with one another. And so we've been having kind of two meetings at the same time. And if anyone has questions of folks who are here, we have Tom Matson, Suresh Ratnam from Caltrans, Steve Madrone. Here we can facilitate that. And if there are some questions that folks in the room have for you, Paul and Jay, so maybe we can figure out a little Q&A session right after this.
Come ask the laptop. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Natalie. So Natalie from RCAA is the one that was speaking there. If you don't know her, and then I did
There's
see
Carla.
a hand raise. I saw a hand raise from Kelly Garrett's computer or phone. I don't know if you still wanted to say something.
No, I was just doing a thumbs up. Great meeting.
Oh, excellent. Well, thanks for the input. And then Lynn or Dennis, and then there's one other person on the phone. If anyone else has any input, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, yeah, Natalie, if you want to grab whoever is available, and we can answer questions on the fly directly through the laptop. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And Lynn's iPad,
Yeah.
Lynn, go ahead.
Question.
Yes.
Of course, we can talk all we want about putting in any of these implementations. Is the money coming from the county, from the state,
Right,
or evaporating into thin air?
So that's a good point. We could have had a slide to talk about that. I apologize. So I've talked a bit about us creating a plan that has some feasible solutions for the community and then presenting those to the county. So part of it is to help them say, where's the need? What are the recommendations that are feasible from an engineering perspective? And identify the ballpark costs associated with implementing that solution. And really positioning then the county to be able to go after grants, either pursue competitive grants or for the county to fund it directly with funds that they have available. The name of the game typically when we work with agencies is that they are looking to go ahead and pursue competitive grants. So this planning study and the public engagement activities creates a really great foundation to then go and say to the state, here's this idea, this need that we have and the idea to address that issue. Give us the money, and with a small match amount or seed money, the county can get the funding from the state. Typically, we have seen a lot of growth in the funding available for projects that really address mobility needs like this for people walking and bicycling and accessing transit.
Are you talking about any kind of a particular timeline here? I saw something recently about the bridge there, the Hammond Trail Bridge, that they were thinking would be addressed by 2027. So we're still talking 5 years out as one example.
Yeah, so then that was another success, I guess we wanted to highlight is there was a federal, dedicated federal funding to replace the Hammond Trail Bridge. That just came about in the last few months. And right now the county still needs to proceed with the design to replace the bridge and work on all the permits and environmental documentation. So unfortunately, the schedule for projects, capital projects and roadway projects like that do take a long time. So we are talking in multiple years. The good news is at least that we have our planning study that provides these ideas and the concepts, and then the county can go ahead and pursue the funding for that preliminary design and environmental for these other options and ideas. So as far as schedule, some of these things do take years. So that's why we wanted to highlight some interim solutions on Central, for example, that could be implemented that with a shorter time horizon.
Time frame. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks very much, Paul.
Excellent. And then Kelly's computer, you had your hand raised.
Hey, can I jump in just for 1 second before Kelly goes? Paul, I wanted to ask if you could make me a host again.